The study was dark except for the glow of 3 monitors. Giovanni Calabrese sat motionless in a leather chair that cost more than most people's cars, his scarred knuckles white against the armrest. The scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of the night his father's fists taught him that mercy was a luxury for the weak. Outside the mansion windows, October wind tore through Boston's wealthy neighborhoods like a blade wrapped in ice. On the center monitor, security footage played in grayscale. 11:08 p.m. A woman in a black and white maid's uniform moved through the service corridor, her head down, her movement so quiet the cameras almost missed her. Mia Reynolds. 28 years old but looking decades older, as if someone had pressed fast forward on her life and forgotten to stop. She carried a canvas bag. She thought no one was watching. Giovanni had been watching for 3 weeks. Every midnight, she slipped through the service entrance. Every 4 a.m., she returned. Different each time. A split lip. A bruise across her ribs visible through a torn uniform. Handprints on her throat like someone had tried to erase her from the world. Fresh blood on her sleeves she tried to hide in the laundry with the silk linens and Egyptian cotton sheets. In the world Giovanni had built, clawing out of poverty, surviving his father's fists, commanding respect through absolute certainty, there were only 2 kinds of people, those loyal enough to die for you, and those disloyal enough to die by your hand. Betrayal had only one price. He had built an empire on that rule. Mia Reynolds moved like a ghost through his mansion. She cleaned his study while he watched from behind the leather chair. She organized his files, dusted his books, never asked questions, never made eye contact, asked for nothing and expected nothing. For someone so broken, she moved through his world with the precision of someone trained to disappear into walls. But she knew every shadow. Every room. Every vault code she had overheard while cleaning the hallway outside his private office, pretending not to listen while men discussed territories and shipments and what happened to people who broke their oaths. 3 weeks of midnight departures. 3 weeks of returning damaged. 3 weeks of her knowing things she should not know, going places she should not go, speaking to people she should not speak to. His lieutenant, Sergio, had raised the question last Tuesday. The maid, Sergio had said, standing in this same study, his hands clasped in front of him. Sergio was tall, built like the granite facade of a cathedral, with a voice like gravel in a washing machine. She's connected to Sophie Langford's operation. We have confirmation. Phone records place her at 3 addresses we're investigating. She's moving information. What information? Giovanni had not looked up from his desk. We don't know yet. But the pattern is clear. She's taking photos of documents. Meeting someone at midnight in the parking garage at St. Mary's Hospital. Returning here like nothing happened. She's smart about it. But not smart enough. Giovanni had nodded slowly. And you recommend? Sergio had not flinched. In 15 years of working for Giovanni Calabrese, Sergio had learned that flinching was a form of weakness that got people disappeared. 1 phone call. She vanishes. No one asks questions. No one remembers her name. 1 phone call. Simple. Clean. The way these things were handled in his world. Giovanni's thumb had hovered over the contact list for 45 seconds while Sergio waited in respectful silence. Something had stopped him. He did not know what. The way she flinched when doors slammed. The way her shoulders tensed at sudden sounds, as if her body expected violence the way other bodies expected oxygen. The way she protected Emma at breakfast. Emma. 6 years old. Dark eyes. Giovanni's eyes, he realized the moment he saw her, the same eyes he had seen in the mirror every morning since they were stolen from him 8 years ago. The girl had arrived bleeding and gasping, clinging to Mia Reynolds like she was the only solid thing left in a collapsing world. A girl with bruises on her small arms. A girl who flinched at sudden movements. A girl who had lived in boxes, who had eaten scraps, who had been treated as less than human. A girl he recognized. The lab results had come back 48 hours later. DNA confirmation. His daughter. The daughter taken from him when she was a newborn. The wound that had driven him to build an empire, to climb higher and higher, to swear that no child would ever suffer the way his had suffered. And she had been suffering all along, in plain sight, within reach, and he had not known. Mia had brought her back. Sergio had seen the shift the moment Emma appeared in the mansion. He had watched Giovanni read her a bedtime story. He had watched Giovanni kneel to her eye level and ask her, with careful gentleness, what her favorite color was. He had watched his boss place his scarred hand on her small head and say nothing, just stand there in silence while something broken reformed inside him. Maybe, Giovanni had finally said to Sergio, "We investigate more carefully before we move." Now, at 11:33 p.m. on a Tuesday night in October, Giovanni watched the monitors. One screen showed the service corridor. One showed the driveway. One showed the kitchen. All three feeds cycling with mechanical precision. The center monitor blinked. New timestamp. 11:52 p.m. Mia moved through the corridor again. She carried a backpack this time. Inside, Giovanni's security expert had confirmed through the footage angle, were documents. His documents. Pages she should not have been able to access. Giovanni picked up his phone. His finger touched the contact. Sergio answered on the first ring. "Yes, sir." "Send the men," Giovanni said. 20. Full tactical. "Move them now." Behind him, unaware she was being watched, Mia Reynolds stood in the servants' quarters bathroom at 2:17 a.m. and stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror. One eye swollen completely shut, the white of her eye bloodshot and broken, the flesh around it purple and black like a storm cloud had settled beneath her skin. Her throat was a geography of handprints. 5 fingers on the left side, 5 fingers on the right, as if someone had wanted to make sure the message was clear: "You belong to us, and we can erase you whenever we choose." Blood dripped from her split lip into the cracked porcelain sink. She had not eaten in 47 hours. She was not sure if the shaking in her hands was from hunger or fear or both. On the counter beside the sink lay $78 in crumpled bills. 1s and 5s and a single $10 bill she had found in a coat pocket 3 days ago. $78. That was everything. That was her entire net worth on this planet. Next to the money sat the envelope. Red letters across the front, "Final notice." Stamped twice, as if once was not enough to convey the permanence of her failure. Inside, a dollar amount that seemed designed to be impossible. $85,000. She owed Douglas Hale $85,000, and she had $78, and in 3 days he would take Emma, and there was no mathematical solution to this equation except disappearance. The letter had arrived on Monday. Douglas had delivered it himself, had cornered her in the alley behind the grocery store where she bought day-old bread, had held her against the brick wall by her throat and explained, with the patience of a man who had explained this particular concept many times before, that failure had a cost. "You understand me," he had whispered against her ear. His breath smelled like cigarettes and cologne and something older, something rotten. 3 days. 85,000. Or that beautiful little girl spends the rest of her childhood in a facility where people like me can access her whenever we want. Do you understand? She understood. The headlights appeared in the frosted window first. One. Then another. Then a third, a fourth, a fifth. Her heart stopped processing individual vehicles and simply surrendered to panic. Through the bathroom window, she saw them pull up in formation along the circular driveway. Black SUVs. Identical. Expensive. The kind of vehicles that meant one thing in her experience: the end. The doors opened in perfect synchronization. 20 men stepped out into the October night. All of them tall. All of them wearing dark suits that probably cost more than she would earn in 5 years. All of them moving toward the mansion with the coordinated precision of people who had done this many times before and had perfected the art of making violence look like ballet. They were here to kill her. That was the only logical conclusion. Giovanni had discovered that she knew too much, had taken his documents, had made contact with Sophie Langford. And now they were here. At 2:17 a.m. With 20 men and tactical gear and the kind of systematic efficiency that suggested her death had already been decided several hours ago, approved at some table where men in expensive suits had voted on whether she deserved to continue existing. She did not scream. Screaming would wake Emma, and Emma had seen enough violence for a lifetime. Mia closed her eyes instead and tried to think of a prayer. Her mother had taught her prayers once, a long time ago, before life had taught her that God was busy with other people's children. She could not remember the words. The footsteps came up the service staircase. Not running. Walking. Measured. Unhurried. The kind of footsteps that belonged to people who already controlled everything and had decided to take their time. She looked at the $78 on the counter. She looked at the final notice letter. She looked at her reflection, the swollen eye, the handprints on her throat, the blood, the complete devastation of everything she had tried so desperately to protect. Then Mia Reynolds, age 28, who had been invisible for so long that she had almost forgotten how to be seen, made a decision that would change everything. She folded the money into her pocket. She picked up the letter. And she opened the bathroom door to face whatever came next. The hallway was dark. The footsteps had stopped. In the silence, she could hear her own heartbeat, fast and panicked and loud enough that she was certain everyone in the mansion could hear her fear. Then she heard the voice. Deep and solid like an oath, like thunder wrapped in velvet. Mia. Just her name. Nothing else. Just Mia, spoken by Giovanni Calabrese at 2:18 a.m., in the darkness of his mansion, and everything she thought she understood about this moment began to crack. For weeks before the footsteps on the service staircase, before the silence in the dark hallway, before Giovanni Calabrese whispered her name at 2:18 in the morning, Mia Reynolds stood in the marble kitchen of his Boston mansion with her hand submerged in water so hot it had turned her skin the color of cooked salmon. October 12th. A Tuesday. The kind of October evening where the wind cuts like a blade through the north end, where dead leaves skitter across driveways like something fleeing, and the sky turns the color of bruised fruit just after sunset. Mia had been working in this house for 11 months and Giovanni Calabrese had looked at her exactly 0 times. She preferred it that way. Invisibility was a kind of armor. When you moved through the world unnoticed, you could not be hit. When no one saw you, no one could take from you. When you were nobody, nobody could destroy you. This was the calculus Mia Reynolds had learned over 32 years of breathing on this earth, and it had kept her alive through divorces and homelessness and nights when she had counted the pills in the bathroom cabinet just to know she had an exit if things got worse. She had not taken the pills. Emma needed her. Even though Emma was not hers, even though Emma was only a name she had heard whispered in the church shelter where she volunteered 3 nights a week, she had decided that Emma needed her more than the pills needed her, and so the pills stayed in the cabinet untouched. Her shift at the mansion began at 6 in the morning with a black coffee she drank standing up because sitting down felt too permanent, too much like claiming a place in the world. Then came the marble floors on her knees, her hands cracking and bleeding from the industrial soap, her back aching with a pain so familiar it had become like an old friend who visited every morning. By 9 o'clock her calves trembled. By noon her vision blurred. By 3 in the afternoon she had learned not to feel anything at all. The cook, a woman named Deirdre who spoke only to her reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator, threw the day's leftovers into a plastic container at 5 o'clock. Mia ate standing in the pantry, her back against the cold wall, her eyes on the door in case anyone came in. She tasted nothing. The food was just fuel, just another obligation to her body that refused to give up even when she gave it permission. 11 months at the mansion meant 11 months of watching money accumulate like snow. $127, hidden in a tampon box at the bottom of her suitcase because Douglas Hale had never thought to look there. Not when he lived with her. Not when he had controlled every dollar and every breath and every moment she was allowed to exist. 3 years, she had been married to Douglas Hale. 3 years was not a long time in some people's lives, but it had been an eternity in hers. At the beginning he had been charming in the way that men who hurt women are often charming. He had smiled at her in the grocery store, asked for her number, told her she was beautiful when she still believed that beauty might be the one currency that mattered. She had been 25 years old and lonely enough to believe almost anything. The first time he hit her was month 4. A broken plate. A backhanded slap that made her ears ring. She had been stupid enough to question why he had come home at 3 in the morning smelling like perfume that was not hers. By year 2 he controlled where she went, who she spoke to, how much money she could spend. He had given her $40 a week and watched her spend it like a raptor watching a field mouse. By year 3 she had stopped asking permission to breathe. She had left him 14 months ago with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes and a cell phone she had hidden from him for 6 months. The shelter had helped her find work at Giovanni Calabrese's mansion through a connection with Father Dominic, a priest who asked no questions and offered no judgment. Mia cleaned his house and received no attention, which meant she was safe. But safety, she had discovered, came with a price beyond money. The evening of October 12th changed the equation. At 9:47 in the evening, as Mia was polishing the banister on the 3rd floor hallway, a banister so rarely touched that dust had accumulated into a kind of archaeological record of neglect, she heard the sound of children crying through the thick walls of the mansion. Not from inside the house. From somewhere far below, muffled and distant, like an echo of suffering that had learned to travel through stone. She should have ignored it. Her shift did not end until midnight. She had no business leaving the mansion before the clock gave her permission. But she had been volunteering at the church shelter 3 nights a week for 8 months, ever since she had realized that other people's suffering made her own suffering slightly more bearable, and she knew that sound the way a person knows their own heartbeat. That sound meant children in danger. Mia set down the polishing cloth. She descended the service staircase without thinking, her feet moving independently of her brain, as though some part of her that was still capable of caring had taken control of her body. The basement door was always unlocked. The shelter occupied the eastern wing of the church basement, 3 blocks from Giovanni's mansion, connected by an underground tunnel that the Calabrese family had apparently built sometime in the 1930s, back when prohibition had made invisible passages a luxury item for wealthy families with things to hide. The basement of the shelter was cold and hummed with the sound of industrial fans working to push heat where heat did not want to go. Children in thin blankets. Children with eyes that had learned to expect nothing good. Children who had already discovered at ages 6 and 7 and 8 that the world was a place designed primarily for their suffering. But one child's cry cut through all the others. The storage room door was locked, but locks meant nothing to people who had learned to move invisibly. Mia found the key where Father Dominic always left it, hanging from a hook shaped like a small wooden cross. Inside the storage room, surrounded by stacks of old hymnals and a single bare light bulb that cast everything in the color of old bruises, sat a girl no older than 6 years old. Dark hair. Giovanni Calabrese's eyes. The child's face was streaked with tears and something darker, and when she looked up at Mia, recognition flashed across her features like lightning. "Papa," the girl whispered. "I want my papa." Mia's hands had stopped shaking 3 years ago, the day Douglas Hale had told her that her mother's rings were not hers anymore because they belonged to him now. But they started shaking again the moment she recognized the child's face from the news. From the missing posters that had been plastered across Boston for 11 days. From the television screens in the shelter's common room where Father Dominic had muted the volume out of respect for the suffering Calabrese family. Emma Calabrese. 11 days missing. Presumed stolen by a criminal network that specialized in taking children from families with the kind of money that could afford to lose them. Also, the news report said. The girl was not presumed to be anywhere. She was here, in a storage room in a basement, and she was trembling like a candle in the wind. Mia wrapped her coat around the child and lifted her onto her hip. Emma weighed almost nothing, which meant she had not been fed well, which meant Mia's body made a decision before her brain could authorize it. She walked out of that storage room. She walked up the basement stairs. She walked out through the front entrance of the church and into the October night where the wind was waiting like something with teeth. Behind her, somewhere in the basement, the other children continued crying. She could not save them all. She could barely save herself. But she could save this one child who was not hers, who belonged to the most dangerous man in Boston, who had called out for her papa with a voice that had cracked like broken glass. The streets were empty at 9:51 in the evening. The kind of empty that made Mia aware of her own breathing, of the footsteps she was leaving behind, of the way a woman carrying a child always looked like she was running from something. She did not know that Giovanni Calabrese's security footage had captured her leaving the mansion at 9:47. She did not know that his men were already mobilizing, already checking hospitals and shelters and every place where a desperate woman might run. She did not know that the child in her arms belonged to a man whose personal security force operated with the kind of precision that suggested they had been trained for exactly this kind of catastrophe. She only knew that Emma was crying, that Emma was scared, that Emma needed her. And for the first time in years, that knowing was enough to make her run straight toward danger instead of away from it. The October wind tore through the Boston Mansion service entrance like a blade wrapped in ice. Mia Reynolds stumbled through the kitchen door at 11:34 in the evening, gasping for air that would not come. Her left eye was swollen completely shut, the lid purple and glistening with blood. Handprints bruised her throat in vivid finger marks, deep purple fading to black where Douglas Hale's hands had squeezed. Her split lip dripped onto her torn uniform. She was shaking so violently that the child in her arms trembled with her. Emma, 6 years old, clung to her neck with the desperation of something drowning. The girl's face was buried in Mia's shoulder, and small whimpering sounds escaped her, not quite sobs, not quite breathing. Just the broken sounds of a child who had learned that the world was a place where people hurt you. Sergio found them first. He was moving through the kitchen at 11:45, checking the locks the way he did every night, a ritual older than habit. His hand went to his weapon before his brain processed what he was seeing. A beaten woman and a traumatized child in the servants' quarters meant liability. Meant a witness. Meant a problem to solve the way problems were solved in this world. His gun was halfway drawn when Sal appeared behind him, saw the same thing, and made the same calculation. But Giovanni Calabrese appeared in the kitchen doorway and the world stopped. He froze mid-step. His face went white, not pale, not ashen, but the white of bone that has been buried. His mouth opened but nothing came out. His eyes locked on the child's face and held there like a man seeing a ghost materialize in front of him. Dark curls. Brown eyes the exact shade of his own. A small birthmark on her left cheek shaped like a crescent moon. His knees buckled. Sergio caught his arm, but Giovanni pulled away. He crossed the room in 3 strides, each movement slow and broken, like a man walking through water. He dropped to his knees in front of Emma. His hands came up toward her but stopped before touching her, trembling in the space between them. He was afraid that if he touched her, she would vanish. That she was a hallucination born from 15 years of aching. His voice came out fractured, barely above a whisper. Emma. My Emma. My little girl. The child lifted her head from Mia's shoulder. Her eyes met his. And in that moment, something ancient and primal shifted in the room. Emma's voice was so small it might have been wind in the walls. Papa. Giovanni broke. He pulled her into his arms and sobbed into her hair, the hair he had washed when she was an infant, the hair he had braided for her 4th birthday, the hair he had been searching for in missing child databases and underground networks for 4,718 days. His shoulders heaved. His entire body shook. In 15 years, Sergio had never witnessed Giovanni Calabrese show weakness. He had seen him order executions without blinking. Order the destruction of rival families without flinching. But this was something no amount of power could touch. Mia collapsed against the wall behind her, blood soaking through her uniform at the shoulder. Her eye was closing further, the swelling pushing her vision into darkness. She was barely conscious. Her legs gave out and she slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold tile floor, breathing in shallow gasps. Giovanni looked up at her over Emma's head and asked one question, his voice a blade wrapped in ice. Who did this to you? Mia's response came soft and broken, each word an effort. It does not matter. She is safe. That is all that matters. And then her eyes rolled back and consciousness released her. Giovanni carried her himself. Sergio reached to help and Giovanni snarled him back so violently that the lieutenant froze mid-step. Giovanni lifted Mia like she weighed nothing, her blood soaking into his shirt, her beaten face slack against his chest. He carried her through the marble hallways of the mansion, past rooms worth millions, past paintings that cost more than most people's houses. He laid her on the guest bed, silk sheets that cost $4,000, thread count so high they felt like touching clouds. He called his private doctor at midnight. The doctor arrived within 17 minutes, moving with the efficiency of a man who had been on call for the Calabrese family for a decade. He cleaned Mia's wounds. He stitched her split eyebrow with careful precision. He said nothing about the bruises, the blood, the evidence of violence. That was none of his business. This was Boston. In this world, questions went unasked. Giovanni posted 2 guards at her door. But even as he watched the doctor stitch her skin, something in Giovanni's mind began to turn like machinery built for betrayal. She knew where Emma was. She brought the child here at the exact right moment. She had been missing from the mansion at precisely the time when his daughter needed saving. In his world, coincidences did not exist. 3 weeks passed. The autumn deepened into bitter cold. October 15 to November 3rd. Each day the wind grew sharper, the dry cold intensifying until breath came out in white clouds. Dead leaves piled against the mansion gates in drifts like forgotten letters. The sky turned grey and stayed grey. Trees shed themselves bare. Mia recovered in the guest wing. Her eye healed from swollen shut to a landscape of yellow-green bruising. The handprints on her throat faded from purple to brown, like shadows of hands that would never release her. Giovanni moved her from the servants' quarters to a proper guest room with a private bathroom, soft carpet, a bed with 6 pillows. She did not understand why. She tried to return to her maid duties on day 4, woke at 4:30 in the morning and crept to the kitchen to begin cleaning. Giovanni found her at 5:52 in the morning, scrubbing the floor on her knees with a brush in trembling hands. He lifted the brush from her hands without speaking. She did not resist. Old habits. Servants do not resist. The conversation came in his study at 8:47 on the morning of October 18th. Mia stood in the doorway wearing borrowed clothes, a soft grey sweater that cost more than her monthly salary, jeans that actually fit her body correctly for the first time in years. Giovanni sat behind his mahogany desk. Sergio and Sal flanked him like statues, positioned to dominate the space. Giovanni, sit down, Mia. She remained standing. The hierarchy was clear. She was not a guest. Giovanni, I am not asking. She sat on the edge of the leather chair, spine rigid, hands folded in her lap so tightly her knuckles went white. Giovanni, tell me how you found my daughter. Mia described the shelter where she cleaned on weekends for extra money. The locked storage room in the basement where children were kept like inventory. Emma's voice crying in the darkness. She described it all with her eye on her hands, never meeting his gaze. Giovanni, who put her there? Mia hesitated. This was the dangerous moment. This was where the conversation could shift into something deadly. I do not know his name. A lie? Giovanni saw it the way he saw everything, with the clarity of a man trained to read deception the way others read newspapers. His jaw tightened. His fingers drummed once, twice on the desk, then stopped. But he did not press. Not yet. Giovanni, you saved her life. You took blows meant to stop you from taking her. Why? Mia's voice came very quiet. Because no child should be treated like cargo. Like they are worth nothing. Giovanni stared at her and in that moment, something cracked in his certainty. She meant it. He had run a background check the night she arrived. He knew her bank account held exactly $78. He knew about the debt collector's letters. He knew she owned nothing, had nothing, lived in a studio apartment in Dorchester where the heat worked only on Tuesdays. And this woman with nothing had risked everything for a stranger's child. Doubt planted its seed in his chest. But she would not tell him who hurt her. She would not explain how she knew Emma was there. In his world, secrets meant betrayal. The dinner came 7 days later. October 25th evening, 7:30 in the dining room. Giovanni insisted that Mia eat dinner with him and Emma instead of in the kitchen where she belonged. Mia sat at the long table feeling the weight of 100 silent judgments. She used the wrong fork. She held her water glass like she was afraid it would break. Sergio and Sal watched from their positions by the walls, their eyes tracking her movements the way hunters track prey. Emma chatted about her day. She had painted a picture of a flower. She had built a tower with blocks. She had learned that dogs could understand more words than most people thought. Mia listened with a soft smile that transformed her exhausted face into something almost beautiful. Giovanni watched this. He watched the way Mia's eyes gentled when she looked at his daughter. He watched the way Emma leaned toward Mia like she was seeking warmth. He felt something shift in his chest that he did not have a name for, something like peace, which was a foreign country to him. After the second course, Emma pointed at the fading bruises on Mia's throat. "Why do you have a boo-boo on your neck?" Mia's smile did not falter. "I fell down some stairs. I am clumsy." Giovanni's knuckles whitened on his fork. After dinner, Giovanni followed Mia to her room. The hallway was lit by sconces that cast everything in amber. Giovanni cornered her outside her door, his voice low and final. "Giovanni, you are lying to me." "Mia, I am protecting you." "Giovanni, from what?" "Mia, from making a mistake." She closed the door between them. Giovanni stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening to her move across the room to the window. He heard the window open. Cold air flooded the hallway. He made a decision he would spend weeks regretting. He found Sergio in the security office. "Follow her. Every night. I want to know where she goes. Who she meets. What she is hiding." Sergio did not ask why. In this world, you did not ask why. 8 nights of surveillance footage painted a picture of betrayal. October 26th, 11 p.m., Mia slipped out through the service entrance wearing a dark coat. She took the T to South Boston. The train rattled through tunnels like the sound of breathing underground. October 28th, she returned at 2 a.m. with a split knuckle on her right hand, blood dried under the nail. October 30th, fresh black eye on top of the old one, a new injury, a new violence. The bruises layered like evidence. November 1st, she limped when she walked. Something in her left knee was injured. Sergio reported to Giovanni in the security office at 3 in the morning. She is meeting someone. A man. Could be selling information. Could be running an operation. Giovanni's rage built like a storm building over water. She was playing him. Using Emma as leverage. Working with his enemies. In his world, this only ended one way. The warehouse on the docks was cold and smelled like rust and fear and something darker that Mia did not want to name. November 29th, 11 p.m. Douglas Hale circled her like a predator circles prey. He was 38, lean and cruel, with a smile that never reached his eyes. Those eyes were the color of gasoline, flammable and empty. Cages lined the walls. Most were empty now, but the chains remained. They hung like accusations. "Douglas, 3 weeks you have been hiding in that mansion. 3 weeks playing house with Giovanni Calabrese's brat. Mia, I brought you what you asked for." She handed him cash, $200 that she had stolen from her own emergency fund. The emergency fund that was supposed to keep her alive if the world collapsed completely. It was collapsing. She was using her survival money to buy time. Douglas laughed. It was a sound like glass breaking. $200? I need $85,000 in 3 days or Sophie and I sell the girl to the highest bidder. You think Calabrese will protect you? He will kill you the second he learns you knew where his daughter was all along. Mia, I saved her. Douglas, you stole her from my operation. You cost me a $2 million ransom. So now you pay it back. Bring me Giovanni Calabrese's business files. His shipment routes. His account numbers. Or I call the FBI and tell them you were my accomplice in the kidnapping. Who do you think they will believe? The maid with a record, or the wealthy businessman? Mia had no record. She was clean. But she did not know that because she had stopped believing in herself years ago. She only knew that this man was holding her life over a cliff and asking her to choose which way she would fall. Douglas grabbed her throat and slammed her against the wall. He squeezed. She gasped, her vision fracturing into white spots. His face filled her entire world, close and cruel and absolutely certain that he owned her. 3 days, Mia. Or Emma disappears forever. He released her and she fell to the floor gasping, her throat screaming, each breath like swallowing knives. Meanwhile, in a private club in Back Bay, Sophie Langford raised a martini that cost $300 and smiled. November 1st, 9 p.m. Sophie was 45, platinum blonde, draped in Cartier jewelry that had belonged to Russian oligarchs. Her beauty was cruel and absolute. She could convince a room that poison was perfume if she wanted to. She usually did. Douglas sat across from her in a corner booth that was by design hidden from the rest of the club. He was explaining the problem with Mia. Sophie, the maid, is becoming a liability. Calabrese is watching her too closely. Douglas, she will deliver. She is terrified. Terrified people are useful. Sophie, and if she goes to Calabrese? Douglas, then we activate Plan B. We have photos of her entering the warehouse. We have recordings of her voice. We frame her as the mastermind and walk away clean. Sophie smiled. She ran a foundation for trafficked women as her primary business, a legitimate cover for something far darker. She used the foundation to identify vulnerable targets, desperate women with no resources, no family, no one who would come looking. She sold them to Douglas's network. She was wealth and respectability covering rot. I do love insurance policies, she said. The garden behind the mansion was grey and cold when Giovanni found Mia there. November 2nd, 3 p.m. She was sitting on a stone bench watching Emma play with a soccer ball on the grass. The child was laughing, actually laughing, for the first time since she had come home. Giovanni sat beside Mia without asking. 30 seconds of silence passed. The wind moved through the bare branches. November pressed down on everything. Giovanni, my father used to beat me with electrical cords. From age 6 to 14. I have scars on my back that look like railroad tracks. Mia turned to him, shocked. Giovanni, I grew up in a basement apartment in Southie with rats in the walls and mold in the ceiling. No heat in winter. Some weeks, no food. I clawed my way out by doing things I am not proud of. But I swore something, I swore that no child would ever suffer like I did. That is why I built this empire. Control means protection. Mia, then you understand why I cannot tell you everything. Giovanni, I understand you are protecting someone. I just do not know if it is Emma or yourself. He stood. He paused. Mia. Whatever you are running from, I can help. You just have to trust me. Mia wanted to. God, she wanted to. But Douglas's voice echoed in the silence of her mind, he will kill you. Giovanni walked away. November 3rd, 11 p.m. Mia received a text message on her phone, tomorrow night. Bring the files or Emma dies. She stared at the phone in her room. The debt collector's letter sat on her dresser, stamped final notice in letters the color of blood. Beside it lay $78 in cash. All the money she had in the world. All the money between her and complete erasure. She had no files to bring. She had no way out. She made a decision that would break everything. She sat down and began to write a letter to Giovanni Calabrese, her hand shaking so violently that the words came out like the handwriting of a dying person. She was going to disappear. She was going to vanish into the city like she had come into it, unseen, unremembered, gone. She would never endanger him again. The warehouse door swung open with the force of a thunderclap. Rain hammered against the metal roof like 1,000 angry fists. Giovanni Calabrese stood motionless in the center of the cavernous space, his black cashmere coat hanging perfectly despite the chaos unfolding around him, a man carved from stone, utterly untouched by the storm both inside these walls and outside in the November night. Before him knelt Douglas Hale. 37 years old, expensive suit torn, face bleeding where Sergio's knuckles had connected. The man who had beaten Mia Reynolds so many times her own reflection looked like a stranger. The man who threatened a child. The man who believed fear could be weaponized into obedience. Douglas was learning otherwise. "Please," he gasped, his voice shattered like dropped glass. "Please, I have money. I have connections. I can." "You can stop speaking," Giovanni said, his voice deep and solid like an oath carved into stone. "That is the only thing you can do now." Sergio stepped forward, his massive frame blocking out the industrial light. He carried a manila folder. Inside were photographs, Douglas meeting with Sophie Langford at exclusive restaurants, their hands passing unmarked envelopes across white tablecloths. Transaction records. Wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Everything. But what made Douglas's face drain completely white was the recordings. Audio files of him selecting victims. Selecting girls. Describing them like livestock. Giovanni opened the folder slowly, letting each photograph fall to the ground like autumn leaves. Douglas watched them scatter across the concrete, and something inside him finally broke. "The Bratva has been searching for you for 3 years, Giovanni said, each word a hammer strike. "Something about a shipment you stole from Sergei Volkov. Cocaine worth $500,000. They have offered a reward, $500,000, for your location." Douglas began to shake. Not from cold. From the knowledge that death was no longer the worst thing that could happen to him. At 10:36 p.m., 2 men emerged from the shadows. Russian accents thick as winter fog. They looked at Douglas the way a butcher looks at meat. They did not speak. They did not need to. They simply moved toward him with the inevitable slowness of an execution. Douglas screamed. High-pitched, animal, desperate. He thrashed against his zip-tied wrists, his legs kicking against the concrete. His voice echoed through the warehouse, bouncing off the metal walls, growing louder and more frantic as the Russians dragged him toward the door. "No, no, no, please, I will tell you everything, I will." The warehouse door swallowed his voice. Silence fell like a stone into deep water. Sergio exchanged a glance with Sal, Giovanni's other lieutenant. In 22 years of working for this man, they had never seen him move with such purpose, such cold clarity. They had seen him order deaths. They had seen him dismantle empires. But this was different. This was personal. Meanwhile, 15 minutes across the city, Sophie Langford was being extracted from the New England charity gala with considerably less subtlety. She stood in her $18,000 gown, navy silk, emerald diamonds around her throat, the picture of Boston high society, when FBI agents approached her on the ballroom floor. The music stopped. The dancers froze. Every eye in the room turned to watch as Agent Morrison read Sophie her rights, her voice steady and certain. "Sophie Langford, you are under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy to traffic minors, and wire fraud involving the exploitation of vulnerable individuals." Sophie's face went pale, then red, then a sickly shade of gray. Her lawyer was already on the phone, her publicist fumbling for her own device, but it was too late. Way too late. The flash photography started immediately. Every camera in Boston seemed to be pointing at her as she was led from the ballroom, her hands cuffed in front of her, her tears ruining her carefully applied makeup. By morning, the headline would be unavoidable: prominent philanthropist arrested in trafficking ring. By evening, her charities would be suspending operations pending investigation. By the end of the week, she would be indicted on 43 counts. The prosecutors were calling for a maximum sentence, 40 years in federal prison. Her name, once synonymous with charity and grace, would become synonymous with something far darker. Back at the warehouse, Giovanni stood alone after Sergio and Sal departed to handle remaining details. The rain continued its assault on the roof, a percussion of falling water that filled the cavernous space. The smell of concrete and rust hung in the air, mixed with the lingering trace of fear, sweat and adrenaline, the smell of a man broken. He found Mia huddled against the far wall, sitting on the cold floor, her arms wrapped around her knees. The black dress she wore was thin, inadequate for November, and her entire body trembled with more than cold. Silent tears ran down her face, each one a small wound finally being allowed to bleed. Giovanni knelt beside her without speaking. He did not ask permission. He did not hesitate. He simply opened his arms, and when she looked up at him, something shifted in her chest. The armor she had built brick by brick, the walls she had constructed to survive, finally began to crumble. She fell into his embrace like a broken thing finding solid ground. "You are safe," he murmured, his voice a complete reversal from the man who had stood before Douglas moments earlier. His hand stroked her hair with the tenderness of someone soothing a wounded animal. "You are safe now. I have you." Mia's body shook with sobs. 3 weeks of terror, 3 weeks of impossible choices, 3 weeks of believing that love meant disappearing, all pouring out in great, heaving breaths. She pressed her face against his chest, and he held her like she was the most precious thing he had ever held, which, he was beginning to understand, she was. "I almost left," she whispered against his coat. "I almost took Emma and disappeared forever." "I know," Giovanni said quietly. "I read your letter. Every word of it. I was trying to protect you. I understand." His chin rested against the top of her head. "And in doing so, you taught me something I had forgotten, that protection is not the same as isolation. That love is not the same as control." The rain fell harder, drumming against the warehouse roof in a rhythm like a heartbeat. Outside, the city of Boston continued its evening, people driving home, restaurants closing, lovers walking through the November night unaware that somewhere in their city, everything had changed for one invisible maid and one powerful man. She had been terrified that she was a burden. She was learning that she was a choice. He had been certain of her betrayal. He was learning that certainty and truth are not always the same thing. As Mia's trembling slowly subsided, Giovanni pulled back just enough to look at her face. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair disheveled, her dress still damp from the rain. She had never looked more beautiful to him. "We need to leave this place," he said. "Emma is at home waiting for you. She has been asking for you every hour." Mia's heart contracted. Emma. She had almost abandoned Emma. "She thinks I abandoned her." "No," Giovanni said, standing and offering his hand. "She thinks you are in danger. She drew pictures of you all day. Pictures of you safe. Pictures of the three of us together." Mia took his hand and stood on unsteady legs. As they walked toward the warehouse exit, toward the rain and the night and whatever came next, Giovanni paused at the threshold. He turned back to look at the empty space behind them, the cages, the concrete, the evidence of suffering. "This place will burn," he said quietly. "By morning, there will be nothing left. No evidence. No memory. Only ash." Mia understood. Justice had been served, but not in the way the courts would recognize. It had been served in the language that men like Giovanni Calabrese understood: swift, absolute, and permanent. The rain washed down on them as they emerged into the November night. The water was cold, clean, washing away the stink of fear and suffering. Somewhere in the city, in a holding cell, Sophie Langford stared at the concrete walls of her temporary prison, her empire crumbling with each passing hour. Somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, Douglas Hale was learning what it meant to truly pay for what you had done. But here, standing in the rain with Mia's hand in his, Giovanni Calabrese felt something he had not felt in 20 years, the possibility of redemption. The rain fell harder, washing the city clean. And in that washing, two broken people began to understand that some miracles come not from perfection, but from the courage to stand when standing seems impossible. The morning light came through the windows like a blessing, pale and quiet and so gentle that Mia Reynolds did not want to move. She lay in the guest room at the top of the east wing of Giovanni Calabrese's mansion, her body wrapped in sheets that cost more than everything she used to own, and for the first time in 3 years, she had slept without nightmares. No images of Douglas Hale's hands. No sounds of Emma screaming. No taste of her own blood. Just sleep. Clean, deep, dreamless sleep. She heard footsteps in the hallway. A child's footsteps, light and fast and already chattering to someone downstairs. Emma. Emma was alive and awake and safe, and that fact alone made Mia's chest ache with a tenderness so sharp it felt like pain. The clock on the wall read 8:33 in the morning. November 5th. A Tuesday. The kind of ordinary day that should not exist after everything that had happened, but here it was anyway, arriving like a miracle nobody had ordered. Mia dressed slowly, pulling on the clothes that had been folded into the dresser sometime while she slept. Not the maid's uniform. Real clothes. A sweater that fit her. Jeans without holes. She stood in front of the mirror and did not recognize herself. Her eye was still bruised purple and yellow, her throat still marked with fingerprints that would take another week to fade, but something else had changed in her face. Something that looked like hope. She touched her own cheek and flinched, not from pain, but from disbelief that she was still here. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like coffee and butter and something frying in olive oil. Emma sat at the marble breakfast table, her small legs swinging as she talked to Sal about soccer practice. The boy had a black eye and a bandaged hand, courtesy of the warehouse, but he was smiling. Really smiling. Giovanni stood at the head of the table reading the Boston Chronicle. The headline screamed across the front page in letters an inch high, "Trafficking ring dismantled." Below it, in smaller type, "Federal investigation closes operation, arrests maid." He looked up when Mia entered the kitchen. His dark eyes found hers across the room, and everything changed in that single moment. Not the room. Not the world. Just the space between them, suddenly charged and heavy with something neither of them had permission to name yet. "Sit," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "Eat. We need to talk." Emma launched herself from her chair and collided with Mia's legs. "You're awake. You slept so long. Sergio said you needed rest because your body was in shock. That is a real medical condition. Did you know that?" The girl was 6 years old and speaking at the speed of someone who had been holding words inside a locked box for too long. Mia knelt down and pulled Emma against her chest, breathing in the smell of her hair, confirming again that she was real, she was here, she was breathing. "I did know that," Mia whispered. "Thank you for telling me." "Sit," Giovanni said again, and Mia stood, suddenly uncertain how to move through a room where she was being asked to sit at the table instead of serve from behind it. She sat in the chair he indicated, across from him. Sal and Sergio exchanged a look neither had seen in 15 years. In 15 years of working for Giovanni Calabrese, they had never seen him wait for a woman. Wait for anything. His patience was not a virtue, it was a weapon. Giovanni slid an envelope across the marble table. It was thick, expensive paper, the kind that meant money. Mia stared at it but did not touch it. "Open it," he said. "I cannot." "Open it, Mia." She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a cashier's check. Her eyes could not focus on the amount at first. Then the number solidified in her vision, $85,000. She made a sound like something breaking inside her chest. "That is your debt," Giovanni said. "The foreclosure notice. The hospital bill for your mother. The legal fees from your divorce. Every penny you owed. It is paid. I cannot accept this." Her voice was barely a whisper, like a candle in the wind. You can. You will. That debt was a chain around your neck. I do not allow chains in my house. He slid a second envelope across the table. This one was smaller. Official looking. Open this one. Mia's hand shook as she extracted a document. Legal papers. Her eye scanned the header, guardianship, minor child. She could not read past that. The words were swimming. What is this? She asked, though she already knew. She knew, and she did not want to know, because knowing would mean accepting something she had no right to accept. That is Emma's guardianship, Giovanni said quietly. It names you as co-guardian. I had my lawyer draw it up yesterday. She is yours now, Mia. If something happens to me, if anything ever threatens this house, you are her mother in every legal sense. No court in the world can take her from you. Mia looked at the paper in her hands, at the signatures already affixed, at the official seal that made it real. She looked at Emma, who was watching this scene with the complete seriousness of a child who understood that something important was happening but not yet what it meant. Why? Mia asked. Why would you do this for me? I am still just a maid. No, Giovanni said. You are not. He stood from his chair and rounded the table. Sergio and Sal carefully became very interested in their coffee cups. Emma continued swinging her legs, waiting. Giovanni extended his hand to Mia. She took it without thinking, the way she had learned to do things in this house, without calculating the cost, without protecting herself, just trusting that his hand would not let her fall. He pulled her up and into the space in front of him. The kitchen was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the city moving outside the windows. Because you risked everything for my daughter when you owed me nothing, he said. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. Because you wrote me a letter saying you loved me and meant it. Because I have spent 15 years building walls, and you walked through them without even trying. He reached up and touched her face with his fingertips, careful of the bruises. Because I love you too, Mia Reynolds. And I do not say that lightly. She opened her mouth and nothing came out. She closed it. She tried again. I am broken, she said. I have nothing to offer you. I have nowhere to offer you. I have no money, no family, no. You are the strongest person I know, Giovanni interrupted. And you have already given me everything that matters. He kissed her forehead with infinite gentleness, the kind of touch that meant something different than desire. It meant protection. It meant permanence. It meant that she would never again be invisible to someone who saw her. Emma made a sound like she was about to vibrate out of her chair with the excitement of not understanding what was happening but knowing it was good. Are you staying? She asked. Mia, are you staying forever? Mia looked at Giovanni. His eyes were waiting for her answer as much as Emma's were. Yes, Mia said. I am staying. The week that followed moved like a dream someone else was dreaming. Mia moved from the guest room to the east wing, to rooms connected to Giovanni's by a door that she kept unlocked. At first she slept in a separate bedroom, but the door between them stayed open, an invitation and a promise. She stopped wearing the maid's uniform. Giovanni took her shopping on a Thursday afternoon to a boutique in Back Bay where the women who sold clothes smiled at her like she was human. He bought her dresses that fit, sweaters in colors that made her skin look less gray. He stood outside the dressing room and waited, patient as a stone statue, and when she emerged in something blue that matched her eyes, he nodded once like a man confirming something he already knew. Emma called her Mama for the first time on a Saturday morning, slipping the words together like they had always been one word, like this was the most natural combination of syllables that had ever existed. Mia cried happy tears, the kind that tasted like salt and possibility. Giovanni watched from the doorway, and for the first time in his life, his men saw their boss's eyes glistening with something that looked like redemption. The debt collector's letter, that final notice that had lived in Mia's pocket like a curse, was burned in Giovanni's fireplace on Sunday evening. She watched it curl and blacken, watched the words disappear into ash. A symbol. A concrete ending to something that had felt eternal. News came in pieces about the cleanup. Douglas Hale's body was never recovered, but the Bratva sent Giovanni a bottle of expensive vodka, the kind that cost thousands, as thanks for removing a problem from their territory. Sophie Langford sat in a federal holding cell awaiting trial, her empire crumbling with each passing hour as federal agents uncovered shell companies and conspiracy upon conspiracy. The networks of her cruelty were being systematically dismantled by people who had been paid to care. Emma stopped having nightmares. She started playing soccer at school. She brought home a drawing she made for Mia, a picture of 3 people holding hands in front of a big house with yellow windows. Mia kept it in her pocket, the way she used to keep the debt notice there, a talisman but of hope instead of dread. Christmas Eve arrived with the first snow of the season. It fell softly, erasing the last of October's bitterness, replacing all that cold darkness with white. Giovanni's mansion was transformed into something from another world, decorated with white lights and garland that smelled like pine and cinnamon. Mia stood in the living room wearing a red dress that Giovanni had bought her, watching Emma hang ornaments on a 12-foot tree. The girl reached high, stood on her toes, and placed a small glass angel near the top. Sergio helped her find the perfect branch. Giovanni wrapped his arms around Mia from behind, rested his chin on her shoulder. He was wearing a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and she could see the edge of the scar that ran along his collarbone, a reminder of a life lived in violence. But his arms around her were gentle. His breathing was calm. "I keep thinking this is a dream," Mia said. "That I will wake up back in the servants' quarters with $78 and a letter saying I have 3 days." "This is real," he said. "You are here. You are mine. And I am never letting you go." She turned in his arms, slowly, carefully, like turning in a dream and wanting to stay inside it. His face was close to hers now. She could see the flecks of gray in his dark eyes, the small scars around his temple, the softness in his expression that nobody else in the world was allowed to witness. "I used to think I was nobody," she said. "Invisible. Like I took up no space at all." "You were never nobody," he said. "You were just surrounded by people too blind to see you. But I saw you. The moment you walked through my door, carrying that girl like she was the most precious thing in the world, I saw you." They kissed while Emma giggled and Sergio pretended to be very interested in untangling a strand of lights. It was not a kiss that belonged in a Mafia story. It was too tender for that. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the point was that even in the darkest corners of the world, in the spaces built from violence and loyalty and terrible choices, tenderness could still grow. It could still survive. It could still transform everything it touched. The camera would pull back if this were a movie. It would show them from outside, through the window, with the snow falling and the warm lights glowing inside like a fire that could not be extinguished. It would show 3 people, no, 4 people now, a small family gathered around a tree, wrapped in blankets, watching the world get beautiful again. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. That is the story of Mia Reynolds. Not the part about the debt or the trafficking or the man who held power like a weapon. The real story was the part after. The part where broken people learned to stand. The part where invisible people learn to be seen. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to believe that second chances are real, that love is not weakness, that protection goes both ways. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story about the impossible becoming real. Comment below and tell us, what would you have done in Mia's position? Would you have trusted a man like Giovanni? Would you have taken his hand? Let me know what is in your heart. Thank you for watching. We wish you good health, joyful days, and peace that fills every corner of your life. We will see you in the next one.